Good morning, everyone. My name is Cynthia Mestanza. I'm the Environment, Health and Safety Manager at Euromines, the European Mining Association. A warm welcome to this Green Week partner event on sustainable management of water in the mining sector, under the framework of the European Green Week towards water resilience. We all, we all are aware that it's becoming increasingly well known that Europe needs to secure a sustainable domestic supply of raw materials. In this context, it's crucial to promote sustainable management of the resources needed to deliver sustainable minerals and metals to the market. For the European raw materials mining sector, one of these indispensable resources is water, which is high demand for both production and the innovation required for decarbonization and the green transition. Therefore, sustainable mine water management is a global imperative. Likewise, climate change is playing an important role in the way to manage water. For instance, regions with water stress and droughts where water management should focus on minimization of external water consumption, conservation, and reusing water. Uh, on the other hand, we have regions where water is not an issue at all, and they have large quantity of water, mostly generated from snowmelt, for instance, where handling water flow is crucial. Today, we engage with leading experts and policymakers in the dialogue that highlights the current best sustainable practices in water management, as well as explore new technologies applicable to different national realities. I would like to thank the European Commission for organizing this part event and allowing us to discuss in the framework of the European Green Week. This webinar is structured in two sessions, the first session with a case study and the second session with a panel discussion. Without further ado, allow me to move forward with our two guest speakers in the case study session, which will showcase tangible practical implementations of sustainable water management within the raw materials industry and innovations driving progress in this essential area.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emilio Sanjuán, and I am the environmental manager at Atalaya Mining. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Euromine, for giving us the opportunity to share with you the water management that we implement at Rio Mine. Also, congratulations for the organization of this event, and thanks again for having us. We have prepared this presentation with the title Efficient Water Management and Theoretic Discharge, which will cover the following topics. Introduction to Atalaya and Rio Tinto Mine, governance, strategy, and finally some metrics. I will start talking about our company, Atalaya Mining. I have to say that Atalaya Mining is a European copper producer that owns and operates the Proyecto Rio Tinto complex in Huelva, Andalusia. Atalaya shares trade on the London Stock Exchange main market and is focused on providing society with essential material required for economic growth and the energy transition. Atalaya Mine is the parent company of several mining companies and projects. Rio Tinto is the current active operation, which comprises the Colorado open pit mine and a modern 15 million tons processing plant. The rest of the subsidiary of the group owns several projects in different development stages, mainly to benefit polymetallic deposits, such as Cobre San Rafael, Atalaya Masa Valverde, and Atalaya Extremadura. In this slide, you can see our portfolio and the location of the project. About Proyecto Rio Tinto mining activity has a rich history dating back to Roman times in the Iberian Peninsula. It was the most important mine for the empire. This historical trajectory continued throughout the century. It was in the 19th century when a British consortium, the Rio Tinto Company plc, transformed the area into one of the world's top mining regions. After main decades of production, the mine was closed in 2001, and 14 years later, in 2015, Atalaya restarted the operation. Proyecto Rio Tinto hosts processing facility like crushing, milling, mining, and flotation to produce copper concentrate, which is transported by road to Huelva port. It also contains waste deposit, tailing management facility, and water and auxiliary installation. Proyecto Rio Tinto has ore reserve and the necessary permit to extend the mine life until 2032. Our philosophy is to improve continually. Therefore, numerous plant optimization initiatives have been implemented to increase ore recovery, reduce energy consumption, and improve the recycling of water. About governance on water, as you know, water is a shared resource crucial for the community within the hydrographic district where our operations are located. Given that many mining activities demand water and have the potential to influence local water sources, effective water management is essential to promote trust among all stakeholders. The sustainability and environmental policies of Proyecto Rio Tinto are committed to an effective use of the natural resources. Particularly, water management is overseen by the Environmental Department of Proyecto Rio Tinto, reporting directly to the senior management of the company. In addition, internal and external audits are conducted with the environmental management system, including water management. About strategy, I have to say that our sustainability, environmental policy, and strategy are the key element for a robust and resilient business model in the medium and the long term. This strategy implies adapting our financial planning and business strategy to climate change by considering the climate-related risk and opportunity identified. Our strategy focuses on the most critical identified risks: water, stress, and drought. In this regard, there are some initiatives that are already in place. The first of one is water footprint. Proyecto Rio Tinto calculate and verify this water footprint, which allow us to be identifying the process or facility where the greater water consumption or deterioration of quality occur. This way, we can implement effective measures to reduce the impact of the activity. The next is thorough leak discharge approach. At Rio Tinto, water consumption happens mostly in the process, used for grading and flotation activity. Further water use include dust control measures to improve air quality, sanitary use for employee, and irrigation. Proyecto Rio Tinto currently uses three sources of water: external surface water, internal source within the mine, and rainwater. Water that falls on the project footprint and is collected inside the facility. For an efficient water use, the project has a treatment plant which allows mine water to be conditioned for reuse in the operation. The recirculated water usage accounts for more than 83% of the total required for our processing. This greatly reduces external water consumption. Regarding water discharge, Proyecto Rio Tinto has a thorough leak discharge approach. Although it holds a discharge permit in the beginning of the activity, it has never made use of it. In addition, I have to say that a new source is in the process of approval. Atalaya applied for a permit to reuse part of the water from the municipal wastewater treatment plant in the industrial process. The volume we have requested will represent 10% of the total fresh water needed for our processing. About Alliance Water Stewardship, AWS, in 2023, a gap analysis was conducted according to the criteria formulated in the AWS standard regarding the level of evidence of completion. The goal pursued by Atalaya is to be able to certify its water management under this standard within 2024 or 2025. Finally, I want to share with you the case study of the tailing thickener. Rio Tinto tailings are deposited in the tailings storage facility, TSF. Once the tailings are placed and settled, the water is pumped back to the processing plant to be incorporated in the process. In 2022, Atalaya completed the commissioning of the new tailing thickener, a project aimed at maximizing the recovery of processed water and achieve the following: maximize processed water recovery, minimize water treatment, and increase the percentage of solid contained in the tailing that is depositing TSF. The commissioning of the tailing thickener therefore resulted in improved process efficiency, making the mining operation more resilient by requiring less water from external sources, as we see next. Finally, I will share with you some metrics. The implementation of the previous initiative has allowed us to obtain an improvement and optimization in water management in Proyecto Rio Tinto. In this slide, you are seeing some metrics, specifically water withdrawal and water recycle, as well as our annual balance sheet for 2023. As you can also see, the amount of water extracted from surface sources has decreased due recovering water in the tailings thickener, leading to a 14% reduction in surface water abstraction compared to last year. Also, recycled water has increased yearly, reaching 28 hectometer cubic in 2023. I have to say that recycled water is the water recovery at the tailing thickener and the water recovery at the TSF. And finally, I would like to point out that the total volume managed amounts to 34 hectometer cubic, of which 83% is recycled, and as you can see, there is no water discarded. Thank you very much.
So hi, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate. My name is Niddi Ögren, and I'm from the Swedish government-owned iron ore mining company LKAB. We have iron ores and processing plants in the northernmost part of Sweden, and I'm head of the environmental affairs for business area iron ore. And I'm going to tell you just a bit about water management and sulfate treatment in one of our sites. So we're going to look into one of our sites. It's actually the smallest one, called Svappavaara. It's the only site that have open pit mines, and we have 2 mines, but currently just running one of them. And the mine Levenniemi, you can see it at the bottom of the picture. We mine approximately 7 million tons of iron ore per year. So the mine is located north of the Arctic Circle, and we have a nearby village. The discharge water from our facilities runs to a small creek and then to national protected water, a river. And you can see it looks like it's spacious, but it's actually crowded because all land and all surrounding water has some sort of national protection for reindeer herding, foresting, or water protected areas. So on your right-hand side, you can see our water system and also our sample points. So we have a monitoring system for both discharge water and from leakage water from the wall rock and from the industrial areas. We reuse around 80% of all the water. And the permit for the Levenniemi mine is from 2016. And discharge water and water handling was set in as an investigation term, and for among others then sulfate. And the investigation is still ongoing. And based on what is known through international research and on our own recipient surveys about sulfate, we can see no impact on the water environment. However, we got a temporary term for sulfate, and it was set to 150 milligrams per liter as a monthly average in recipient. And this is important. It's a term in recipient. So at the bottom there, you can see the natural flow of this small creek called Liukatijoki as the blue line, and you can see our discharge water as blue dots before we went into flow handling, and then you can see the discharge water in a red line after water handling. So this 150 milligrams per liter term has been really challenging for us to reach, especially during periods of low flow in the creek. So to minimize the risk for discharge overflow, we control it and adjust it to the natural flow in the creek and also to the natural sulfate in an upstream sample point. And it has given us an improvement, but it will not be enough. And especially during snow melting periods in March to April, we have some challenging to reach this target. So our next step in water handling is actually to increase the capacity of the settling pond in order to store more water during low flow periods. But as I said, flow handling is not enough. So we have also looked into some treatment, and that was also part of the investigation term that we should. So the first we investigated and did some lab and pilot test on was chemical precipitation technique. So by adding lime and aluminum and increasing the pH, we got some good results. It's a possible technique for us to use, but we also got a large amount of sludge. And the thing is that in landfill, this sludge must be maintained at a high pH. Otherwise, if it rains, we will have some leakage. And the leakage, as you saw on a prior slide, will lead to the same creek as our discharge water. So the next thing we looked into was some technical biological purification. It's a quite new, low maturity technique, and the method requires some pre-treatment in order to remove particles and lower the calcium content. It also needs a large amount of ethanol or large volumes of hydrogen gas for the technology to work. And again, we got some great results on sulfur content, but we also got large amount of sludge. And we could also see that the treated water needed some extensive post-treatment with nitrogen purification, membrane purification, and evaporation in order for us to be able to discharge it to recipient. So our first conclusion is that treatment is doable, but tricky. So therefore, we have a new hypothesis, and that's to remove the sulfate before we have it in the process water. And we can see that the sulfate is connected to the anhydrate in our ore. So now we are trying to see if we can remove the anhydrate from the iron. So we did some tests on a lab scale where we actually washed away the anhydrate from the raw material with saturated process water. And now we're moving forward to pilot scale with some grinding, followed by magnetic separation, and then combined it with some wind screening to see if we can get more anhydrate off the raw material. We still really haven't figured out the waste handling, but we can see that it will be smaller amounts and it will be a dry waste for us to handle on deposit. So, as I said, just a quick brief introduction, but I will give you some conclusions as well. We see that treatment is doable, but really challenging. We got some unwanted substance to processed water. We got large amount of sludge. It's both expensive and difficult to manage. And if you remember, we actually had some issues with land use as well in a crowded space. And it's some emerging techniques, high cost, high risk, of course, for us. So we are actually more and more looking further into water handling and to some processes in the internal stages, not to get the sulfate into the water in the first place. So just to send with you that treatment do come at a cost, because it might produce some consequential effects, which in themselves has an environmental impact that you actually need to handle after treatment. So that's all for me. Thank you for giving me some of your time.
Hello, I'd like to thank our speakers, our two speakers, for such enlightening case studies, which have paved the scene by showcasing the tangible actions and innovation techniques driving progress in the field of water management. I'm sure that your leadership in environmental management will play a key role in securing a sustainable mining supply and industry. Moving forward, we will transition into a robust roundtable discussion. I'm really excited to moderate these panel discussions for around 45 minutes or 1 hour, to be seen. We are esteemed. We have 4 panelists who will delve into the challenges and opportunities of sustainable water management in the mining sector. I believe that your unique perspective on regulatory framework, collaboration between policymakers and industry stakeholders will enrich our discussion. We are privileged to have with us Stefan Leiner from the European Commission and Plöger, advisor at the European Parliament, David Granberg from Boliden, and lastly, Niddi Ögren from LKAB. I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves briefly in the following order. So let's start with Stefan, then Anne, David, and Niddi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And first of all, thank you very much for Euromines to organize this satellite event for the European Green Week. I'm the head of the Industrial Emissions and Safety Unit in DG Environment. We are part of the directorate dealing with the Zero Pollution Action Plan. And within that framework, there are a lot of legislative initiatives that we have done under the Green Deal in order to help EU becoming more water resilient. And in that context, I'm, for example, in our unit, we are in charge of the Industrial Emissions Directive, which has adopted a number of new elements in its revised proposal, which was recently adopted, that will help also supporting our industry in the EU to become more resilient against water. And we really count on everybody to engage in this work in order to make sure that industry, including the mining industry, becomes more effective in, on one hand, reducing the pollution into our precious resource, which is water, but on the other hand, also in making sure that water is used in a more efficient way, because it's becoming more and more rare and more of a precious gift that we have, that we need to take care in a very, very responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Anne?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Anne Plöger. I work as an ITRE and ENVI advisor to Ms. Hildegard Bentele from the EPP group in the European Parliament, who herself was the rapporteur to the initiative report on critical raw material supply and also the EPP shadow on the final CRMA. I think we've come a long way to show that mineral deposits are where they are and we cannot move them. And we've also heard a lot about the obvious link between water management and mining and water use. So it's quite obvious that sustainable mining also needs to embrace sustainable water management in our hands. And we think we have found a good way into the CRMA to prove that we want to go down that pathway. But there are also 3 remarks that I would like to do to underline what we think is important in this context. So first of all, there is no either or approach. We need to diligently balance our need for sustainable mined raw materials and also our willingness and the need to protect the environment. And then secondly, we have to differentiate between the EU and third countries, because obviously we have high standards in the EU, and we have reviewed some of them recently, just like Stefan outlined. But we also need to watch out that our European regulation is consistent with the policy strategies that we set for the raw material supply chains. And on the other hand, we have to acknowledge that we cannot push our EU standards on third countries in a copy and paste manner. And thirdly, and the two speakers in the beginning are very proof of that, there is a lot of innovation out there and a lot of willingness to tackle the problem, which is obviously also a huge matter in the public acceptance process. And therefore, I'm very happy to be here today and be part of the dialogue and to learn from each other and go hand in hand towards a sustainable supply.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. David Granberg. I am a lawyer at Boliden Group, metals and mining company in Northern Europe. I work actively with supporting our sites around Europe with permitting, but also giving strategic advice to our units and management when it comes to sustainability issues. I'm also working with regulatory affairs and active in industry organizations like Euromines, where I am chairing the Environment Committee. And of course, then I'm very, very pleased to see two members presenting this type of inspiring and presentations and impressive projects, which I think shows what we can do within the European metals and mining industry. It takes dedication, it takes investment, it takes research and development, but we are front runners. So thanks for the presentations. Glad to be here.
Thank you, David. And Leslie and Niddi, please.
Yeah, so hi again. My name is Niddi Ögren. I'm the head of environmental affairs for LKAB business area iron ore. In my continuous day, I handle permits and environmental investigations. I also manage the dam safety department for our company. I think it's important, and sometimes it gives me like a aha moment when we sit in Euromines, and I'm also part of the Euromines environmental committee, just to see the different areas that we're mining in and how different topics we need to handle. But I'm glad that we're doing it together and really sharing our best practices and do's and don'ts when it comes to water management.
Indeed. Thank you, Niddi. Well, for this discussion, we will have 2 rounds of questions and then closing remarks from you. I am pleased to start this panel debate, this panel discussion, and we will start with the same order. So I will start with Stefan. We already know that we have several European regulations on water. We can name several directives, such as the Water Framework Directive, the EQS, environmental quality standards, and even the new version, as already mentioned by Stefan, the new version of the Industrial Emissions Directive, to ensure a good quality water status and prevent environmental pollution in general, which industrial operators should comply with. From your perspective, Stefan, how can the mining industry work collaboratively with policymakers and other stakeholders to achieve a sustainable mining industry?
Well, thank you, Cynthia. First of all, I think most important is to engage. To give you one example, during this Green Week, the European Commission launched a new campaign called Waterwise EU Campaign. And with this campaign, we want to build a new consensus on longer-term measures and define an inclusive and comprehensive trajectory for the EU to achieve water resilience by 2050. And for that, we really need everybody on board in this work. And we also need an innovative approach if we are to achieve this ambitious objective. So it's important for the mining sector not only to take part in the discussion, but also to spread the word wherever you go, help raising awareness, spark conversation, and inspire action in the name of water resilience in your own community, in your own mining sites, in your own country. And I really think it's important that for every of you, water becomes a priority in your own boardrooms. Now, the second point is to engage in the implementation of the various pieces of EU legislation that you already mentioned, Cynthia, as indeed, during the European Green Deal, the Commission has proposed and the Parliament and the Council now adopted a wide range of very important new or revision of existing pieces of legislation that really improve our regulatory framework in the EU in order to both reduce pollution, but then also to manage water more efficiently. And I mentioned one of the examples, which is the new IED 2.0. As you know, the IED 2.0 has enlarged the scope, and part of the new scope is also now the mining of metal ores, and one of the essence of that is the development of so-called BREFs, which are best available techniques reference documents, which also include best available technologies conclusions, which become legally binding and set a European-wide framework for both emissions values, but also performance levels, which will now have to include also binding performance levels for water efficiency. And we have just started now a new so-called exchange of information process, which we call the Sevilla process, in order to develop the specific BREFs and best available technique conclusions for the specific sector of mining of metal ores. And this provides a unique opportunity for the mining sector to engage in the development of European standards on water efficiency and water pollution. The two examples that we saw today from Emilio in Atalaya and from Niddi on LKAB already show that there is a lot of best available techniques that are being developed, that are out there. We need to put them all together at the European level so we really can see that everybody of the sector contributes towards meeting what is best possible in order to both reduce pollution and also use water more efficiently in their operations.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for these comprehensive first remarks. We continue with Anne. We already know as well that within this EU regulation, we have the new Critical Raw Material Act. And we already know that, Anne, you have been quite active in shaping this new Critical Raw Material Act as a very important milestone for Europe, which will ensure access to us and secure sustainable supply of raw materials. This Critical Raw Material Act has included the aspect of environmental sustainability as a main focus. As we see, for instance, in the certification scheme with water management and the environmental footprint as well. And how do you envision the mining industry will adapt to meet these demands, particularly concerning minimizing environmental impact to water?
Thank you, Cynthia. Well, first of all, I have to say I'm very thrilled that the CRMA finally came into force. So yay, it's there, it's up and running. We know the first cut-off date. So companies, please, please, please apply. The cut-off date is the 22nd of August, and we want to see the projects being ready for the European label until the end of the year. So please do the efforts, get in there, get your application up and running. That said, of course, environmental protection is a huge issue in the CRMA. It always was. There was just a little struggle in the negotiations of whether we should have a priority on the one against the other. And this is something that we always say it cannot happen if we talk about strategic access to materials that we need for our future demand. So we've reached a lot within the last 4 years. We got a common understanding that we need a certain amount of sustainable mined raw materials. We've come to an understanding that, of course, we need to have a look at environmental protection and standards. But, and this is very much of EPP line in the final act, we also diligently balance those two priorities. This is a very important part for us. That shows, for example, in the fact that for EU projects, we acknowledge the fact that our standards in the EU are very high and very good, and we don't see the necessity to put an additional layer on here. We even see the need to, for the future, have a look on the consistency of other policy fields with the strategy that we just accomplished under the CRMA. And then we need to understand that there is no competition. We see that companies have an interest in having environmental sustainable projects. Of course, this is a huge part, like like Niddi said from LKAB and also the colleague from Atalaya. This is very important for the public acceptance and for the stakeholder dialogue to also show that you care about the impact, the possible impacts on environment, and to mitigate those risks. Of course, there is a link between multi-management and mining that we cannot deny. But what we can do is work responsible on it for the best outcome to combine our strategic need of materials and the need to do our best to protect our environment, literally the water resources, because we're all aware of the global water circle and the connectedness of our water resources, and that this is another impact than, for example, biodiversity in a certain framework. So what we acknowledged is that the EU has a good set of standards and that we should use our expertise, our technology to also have an impact on responsible mining in the world out there, namely the third countries. And this has been a part that has gone into the international partnerships. We've seen that with all the raw materials partnerships that have been conducted lately. Australia was joining happily, also Norway was joining. So this is, of course, always a huge part and should always be, but it should not be used as a barrier, but as an enabler. This is the message that was sent from the Parliament quite clearly, I think.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we are aware that the water management and in general, the sustainable management of the mining sector, it's linked as well with the social acceptances in the regions that we are mining. And my third question would be for David. We already know that the mining industry is often associated with negative environmental and social impacts due to water. Sometimes in the public debate, water is the main reason why we should not have mining operations here or somewhere else. What sustainable water management practices have Boliden implemented so far, David? Can you give us a flavor on what is Boliden doing?
Yes, thank you. When it comes to sustainable water management, I think I would like to take that in 3 steps. The first step is prevention. We try to prevent water from being contaminated. And we can do that in different ways, but we mine a lot of sulfidic ore with sulfides in it. So then what we do is try to prevent sulfide oxidization, to prevent oxygen from reaching, for example, tailings and mining waste. So that's one important aspect, prevention. But then we can't prevent everything, not technologically possible. So what we do then is recirculation of water, as we saw from Atalaya mine here. They are recirculating all of their water, more or less. We are in another region of Europe where we have more water coming into the mining area than what we can use. So we can't, we need to have discharges just because of climatic conditions. But what we do is we recirculate the process water so that we don't have to take fresh water to use in our processes. So our operations run, most of them run 90% on recirculated water. And that has really made improvements, reducing our emissions and our impacts on the environment. And then third step, after prevention, recirculation, for the water that we need to discharge due to climatic conditions, we focus on robust treatment techniques. And when I say robust, that is because, as you pointed out initially, Cynthia, in this part of Europe, we have, for example, large flows during snow smelt at spring, very cold water coming at varying and high flows. So we need to have, we can't use all of the same technologies that we can do in other types of processing industry. We use those techniques too, but that's for smaller streams. For these large streams, we need other techniques. We use a lot of lime to adjust pH and precipitate metals. We use hydrogen peroxide to oxidize some compounds, and we can do a lot with this and significantly reduce our impact. But
David,
yeah.
if you allow me to complement that, the first question, what are the current challenges that your company is facing now to achieve sustainability, or in this case, sustainable water management?
Yeah, of course, there are always challenges. There are many. And as soon as we have dealt with one, we start dealing with the next one. As I said, being in Northern Europe, we have these sort of climatic conditions with large varying flows, cold water. But then there is also built into this, there is one challenge is, of course, that nothing ever disappears. Even if we have a treatment process to remove one substance, that doesn't mean that that substance disappears. It usually means that we create a waste, as I believe Niddi's presentation really showed very well. And then we need to handle that waste. So we need land for a landfill or something similar. So that's a challenge that we need to. Treatment means also waste management. That's a challenge that we need to keep in mind. Energy is another aspect when it comes to treatment technologies. Some treatment technologies require a lot of energy. Some others have a CO2 impact. So that means that we can't just always treat everything more and more and more, because that might not be the most sustainable solution. And that, I think, is why many of us in the industry are looking more at clever ways of managing the water so that we can release as little as possible by recirculating as much as possible, and by adapting how we release to natural flows in the receiving waters. But those are some challenges. And finally, I would have also to point out that it might sometimes be difficult to focus on what we feel is the right issues, and that might sometimes has to do with the regulatory environment that we are operating in. We are very much focused on lowering the measured emissions, but sometimes that a very low environmental quality standard built on the precautionary principle might sometimes force us to focus on reducing a certain substance as much as possible, while we feel that we could do more good for the environment by focusing on something else. So that focus issue is also something that's a challenge to us.
Yeah, what I can summarize a bit. Thank you for your replies, David. I could say we should more focus on an holistic way to see sustainability, to see how we can reduce the environmental impact.
Exactly.
And the same direction will be for Niddi. I would have the same questions for you, Niddi. We already noticed that you are applying emerging techniques, innovative techniques to treat sulfates in this case. But I'm sure that you are doing the same with tackling another substances and in general for decarbonization. So what will be, from your perspective, the challenges that your company is facing to achieve a sustainable water management?
Yeah, I could actually take almost a copy-paste on David. But I think it's challenging when you're in permitting processing, having the feeling that you're kind of out of topic. Instead of talking about effects in the water systems, you're stuck on total content of something instead of looking into the actual effects. But I think that's the way it is. So for me personally, I think it's the opposite relations that we've been discussing, and everything we do on both water handling, for example, having capacity for storage or for treatment, it requires land, and we don't have access to that land, and we don't have access to enough land that we need. And then, of course, taking virgin land, we have some other losses on biodiversity. That is also an important question for us and for the local communities to have that in place. So I think it's tricky that way, but concerning me now is actually to find the right competence that wants to work with environmental questions and mining companies. To attract the right kind of competence and also to have them come and work on site. It's challenging for us. So we now have to look into school visits more often, going on lower and lower grades in school in order to find the right kind of girls and guys wanting to come and work for us in 10 years. So that's really challenging and sometimes scary to see that our experts are getting older and older, and we need to fill up with new ones for us to continue to have this kind of work with emerging techniques and testing everything that we need to do, being north of the Arctic Circle.
Thank you, Niddi, for bringing up this another angle on this word that is the skills. If we would like to achieve sustainable mining and to have more mines in Europe, we need the right competence to do it. So thank you for that as well. I could go for the second round. So I will restart with Stefan. Thank you very much so far for your thoughts. And my second question to Stefan would be whether the European funding opportunities already in place to help our industry to reach sustainability in general, and especially in reaching sustainability on water management.
Thank you, Cynthia. Well, overall, I think there are many funding possibilities from the EU. When you look at the current multi-annual financial framework that is running from 2021 to 2027, there are overall around 25 billion euro that are available for water-related measures over those 6 years. Now, the biggest chunk of that money comes from the cohesion funds, the European Rural Development, Regional Development Fund, and the Cohesion Fund, which provides about half of that, as well as the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And they are often used to upgrade wastewater treatment plants, building dams against floods, but they can also be used in order to support those kind of investments that are needed. And recently, the Commission proposed, and it was very recently adopted, the new Strategic Technology for Europe platform STEP that can help boost funding for Made in Europe green tech that accelerates the development of advanced techniques for processing, for example, saline water or cleaning up wastewater, or for other really innovative technologies that also have been mentioned today. Now we have some other possibilities on water, but I guess they are less relevant for mining operators. I mean, the European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development has available about 3 billion for smarter irrigation. The Horizon Europe cluster is also having quite some availability to research and also develop innovations in new innovative techniques to reduce pollution and be more wise in the management of water. And the very small but nevertheless beautiful fund LIFE has also possibilities for the private sector, like the mining industry, to engage in some LIFE projects together with others at the European scale to also develop and implement some new ways to deal with this. But having said that, I mean, this will all be supportive to the private sector, but I think the bulk of the investments will have to come from the private sector itself, also taking into account that investing in cleaner technologies, in more resource-efficient technologies, in circular technologies will also be very useful in the balance sheet of those. And I think there are the recent developments in the EU taxonomy, etc., will also help banks and other investors to also channel funding to those kind of clean and circular technologies that we need, and also to be done by the sector itself.
Thank you, Stefan. And then we continue with Anne. What I grew up from your first statements was that we need this balance, stock taken to achieve sustainable mining. How, from your perspective, how can the mining industry work collaboratively with policymakers and other stakeholders to achieve sustainable mining? And what are the key challenges and opportunities for building more effective partnerships and collaboration?
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. That's indeed a very crucial question. So there's, on the one side, the public dimension. So we believe that companies, but also local policymakers, need to go into the dialogue. It is of utmost importance that local communities understand why a project is going to be in their community and what's the benefit of it for the local community and in a broader sense. We've seen that this has been a problem for some important projects in the past, and we cannot risk to have more of these going down just because there's a problem with public acceptance. This can be solved only by clear communication and a true dialogue, and we call on companies to go further with this. We know there are best practices, there are very good examples, and this is also a core pillar of the CRMA. Go into the communities, talk to them, talk to the public, make sure that everybody understands why you're there, what you're doing, and what you're also doing to mitigate the risk we are discussing today. And then on the other hand, and I say local policymakers because we've also realized that there's, of course, not always this working hands in hand together between companies and local policymakers and international policymakers. But there is a clear storyline that people need to understand. I think we've come a long way throughout the last years where we need to further improve. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, we need to enable our industry. We have seen that there is a lot of innovation, there is a lot of will to work on these issues. Like Niddi said, this comes at a certain cost. So there are two main issues, time and costs. We have been able to work on the time matter, apparently not so much on the cost matter because we simply didn't have any new resources. So we have the step, of course, that Stefan already mentioned, but we also keep the door open within the CRMA to have further investment opportunities. There will be a report showing what we will need to come closer to our strategic goals. We need more active involvement of the EIB. We need more active involvement of national players in this regard. We've seen some progress, well, we need to see more because obviously time and money are decisive. And then the last one is that we as policymakers in the EU, of course, need to have the right regulatory framework. And here again, I'm pledging for a policy coherence that keeps in mind that we have strategic goals that we've just decided on, and we should ensure that our legal framework is consistent with what we've done here together, with what we've done under the Green Deal, but more into the direction and the connotation that we have under the CRMA and especially under the Net Zero Industry Act, because obviously this is a matter of competitiveness, and competitiveness comes at a price.
Thank you very much, Anne. And moving forward, I would proceed with David again with my second question. So we are aware that without a sustainable supply of critical raw materials, there will not be any green transition. How, from your perspective, David, how we can ensure decarbonization and a new green fossil world? I mean, for instance, deep into industrial transformation in the mining sector, and at the same time reach sustainable use and management of water resources. Sometimes it's a bit challenging because we know that innovation needs more energy, needs more water and more resources sometimes. What are your perspective on this?
Well, I think you are right to point out the difficulties and the challenges, but I would say that it's doable to achieve both goals, both a sustainable water management and a green transition. And one thing is what I was talking about before, we need to focus on the right issues. We can't do everything, so I would like to see perhaps a bit more holistic approach focusing on functioning and resilient biology rather than perhaps always reducing everything to the maximum. And that also has a bearing on CO2 and energy, because pumping and treating water costs not only money but also energy, which we need to save. But I also think that in order to decarbonate the industry, we are moving towards electrification. So to widen the discussion, we are dependent on stable supply of fossil-free and affordable energy in our industry, like in the whole other industry in Europe. So that's another issue. And then I would like to also come back to what Plöger was talking about and describing very well, the need for policy coherence. We need to have a regulatory framework that allow us to develop in the industry. The mines today are performing a lot better than the mines that were designed 30 years ago. We are still on some side stuck in old design solutions 30 years ago, but the mines designed now and designed tomorrow will be even better. But that means that we need to have a regulatory framework that allow us to open new mines and new mining waste facilities, new tailings ponds, where we can implement new solutions. And that sometimes will need to be done on a place where there is a habitat or a water body. So we need to be able to balance interests against each other. But I think it's doable to do both.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And then Niddi, we have seen that at LKAB you are already taking actions regarding innovation. So what else is LKAB doing regarding researches or innovation, emerging techniques to optimize a water use or water management?
Yes, well, I think when I first read it, easy question. When I started thinking about it, it's not so easy to answer. But again, just looking into where we stand, well, we've done a lot. We have a high percentage of reusing. We have clear groundwater coming up from the mines. We have tailing deposits handling the water. But we have a surplus during the year, springtime, summer, fall, and we have leakage of water during wintertime when it freezes over. So to find technologies and techniques handling waste that works when it's, for example, this winter we had 2 weeks with 40 degrees minus Celsius for 2 weeks. And then we have had an explosive spring when everything is green already now. So actually to find a way to handle those different situations, and of course with the climate change it would probably be even worse. So we have to look into so many different things, and we have to do it at the same time. So time, as Anne was into, it's crucial for us, and we need more clear directions where to prioritize, what to focus on, because we can't look into everything at the same time and then also have to adjust it to our climate conditions. So time is our key thing there. Did you want anything more specific from me, Cynthia? Another technique or something?
No. Well, if you have something on mind, you can mention them. If not, I'm quite satisfied, I would say.
And I'm satisfied as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Niddi. Well, many thanks for your thoughts and perspective so far. As we are approaching to the end of today's webinar, May I ask you to provide concluding statements that you would like to leave the audience? Perhaps we can start with the same order. So we will start with Stefan, then Anne, David, and Niddi for your group up statements.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. First of all, I want to again thank you and Euromines for organizing this event. I learned a lot about what is possible, and yes, there are challenges, but as David said, I'm very much convinced that it's doable and all of those challenges can be resolved. I want to react a little bit maybe on what have been said by Anne and others, that we need more policy coherence. And I think we look, for example, into the revised Industrial Emissions Directive and the Critical Raw Materials Act and the Net Zero Industry Act, and how they are either mutually not supportive or supportive. And the conclusion was that they are very much supporting each other. We know that, for example, one of the biggest problems for businesses to face competitiveness issues are not related actually to meeting high environmental quality standards, but it's more related to high energy prices, to issues related to public acceptance. Anne mentioned that as well. And the fact that we are creating a European-wide level playing field by having common standards that avoid that in one member state you have very high and another a very low one, but everybody has to meet in a certain range. And you can then to your local population say, look, in our permit, we are meeting European-wide best available technologies in order to meet these standards, also will help in raising awareness about at the local level that actually what is being done by the mining industry in that particular site is very much top-notch when it comes to meeting European level standards. So there is a lot of possibility, and as I already mentioned in my first intervention, this very inclusive, science-based, fact-based Sevilla process ensures that whatever we do will make sure that the sector itself is fully engaged in order to discuss possible trade-offs between various cross-media effects or taking care of very specific situations, as indeed in the north of Sweden, the situation is very different than in the south of Spain, as we have seen in the two case studies. So I just call again to all of us to work closely together. I'm very much convinced that we can make it. We can remain competitive, remain top-notch when it comes to improving the way that we manage our very rare water resources. And I look forward to further cooperate with all of those that have been here today, that are listening to us, and others involved in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And we move with Anne.
Thank you, Cynthia. I have to agree on the fact that this was a I got a lot of inspiration from what was said today. And I have to agree with Stefan that indeed there is a good coherence between industry emission and net zero and CRMA, but this is because we had an extra close look on this. This is not coming as a given. Of course, the CRMA now is union law. So from now on, it needs to be taken into consideration in impact assessments for other regulation. But the triangle that you mentioned was because the rapporteur for the NZIA is literally 5 meters from me in that direction. And the office of the rapporteur for the EID is just a few floors down. And we were aware of those inconsistencies. But I can name other files where we still have a high risk in the future. May it be REACH, may it be Water Framework, may it be others. And things we didn't like so much in the past, like the nature restoration, but we better get not started on that one. And something that is ongoing, like the soil monitoring, where we just wanted to have a very clear exemption of not only mineral deposits but also mining sites, which was not really understood by a lot of people involved why this is necessary and should be a given. And even Commission said for them it's a given, but it was just not legally soundly worded in the proposal. So there is work to do, but I fully agree this is doable, and I see that there is a lot of joint effort on this, and this makes me very happy for the future. What I also wanted to say, just because it's only 2 weeks until European elections, please use your vote. And then last but not least, 22nd of August, companies, please make us happy with a lot of great project applicants for the different benchmarks that we set in the CRMA. I'm fully convinced that we have great projects out there, and I cannot wait for them to realize.
Thank you, Anne. May I ask you, David, for your wrap-up remarks?
Yes, of course. First, thank you, Cynthia, for organizing this, and thanks to the presenters and my fellow panelists. It was great to hear your thoughts on this subject. That's very important to me. Some key takeaways for me from this session. First, for us in the industry, I think we all got the message that we need to keep improving, as we already are doing, but we can never rest. And that a lot can be done. It's not only about end-of-pipe solutions. It's perhaps even more important to work with water management in the meaning of recirculating and preventing pollution. I also think that it's important what Stefan said, BAT, best available technology. That's something that us in the mining industry in Europe needs to apply, and we are ready to do that. With that said, I also think that we need to focus on creating a regulatory framework that allow us to build the mines of the future and the tailing facilities of the future, using the best available techniques and the emerging techniques. And I think that we sometimes need to have a regulatory framework that gives us a bit more room to balance interests against each other. The interest of protecting a habitat or a water body against the interest of building a new modern mine or other industrial facility. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. And then Niddi, please.
Yeah. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be here, and especially thanks to Stefan and Anne. Nice to meet you. Well, I think we all need to prepare for the future, no matter if you're on a EU level, Euromines, or the industry. We need to prepare for the future, because the challenges on quantity and quality of water will probably not be easier. So we really need to be on our toes in this, and to find the right skill, make some new friends, asking around, also having discussions with the regulatory policymakers, and so what to just get our priorities in order for this to work. And then, of course, for all of us to start where we stand, and hopefully as many of us will be standing in a mine the coming years, because that's where we need to start this work.
Thank you, Niddi. Indeed, for me as well, Anne was a very inspiring session. I'm pleased to have been discussing with you. Many thanks to wrap up. Several takeaways that I will reflect on this. But for me, it's clear that the path toward decarbonization or towards sustainability requires commitment, and was already emphasized by Stefan. We need to engage. We need participation from several stakeholders, as Anne already mentioned. We need dialogue. We need to include our clear message. We need to work together with local communities, with national governments, industry, policymakers. All together, it's an imperative for me as well, and for the mining sector. I would like to emphasize as well that we are front runners. The mining sector has very high standards on environment, on health and safety, on work conditions. So we need to ensure that our sector is attractive to meet the future challenges. As well, going to the challenges, we already know that we have plenty of challenges, but these challenges make our life interesting. And as I already mentioned, was mentioned by David, is doable. And this is the optimistic way that we are always trying to work in the mining industry. We don't have the answers to these challenges. However, we see opportunities, and we are constantly moving developments forward. That is our key, the innovation, our research to meet our commitments. Then I will as well highlight that we need a more holistic approach as well. Not rather to focus on lowest as the minimum possible limit values of certain substances. We need to focus on more holistic approach, and it's also linked with coherence between EU regulation. For instance, Niddi mentioned that the water management, it's also linked with land use. It's always linked with new habitats, protected areas, so nature restoration. Everything is linked, and this is the holistic way that we need to approach as a policymakers, as an industry, as any stakeholder. Well, I will stop here. I think, I believe I could give you some thoughts and lines up on this, and let's continue to work together. Many thanks to you for your brilliant contribution. Thank you for your willingness to be here with us. Let's continue work together towards a greener and more sustainable mining industry. And I would like to say as well a big thanks as well to the audience for your attention, and much looking forward to having another discussion next year in the framework of the EU Green Week. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good afternoon. Bye-bye.